facts wrong. He misrepresented what biologists teach, which is kind of a theme with him. And then he turns around and blames me for all of these terrible, terrible problems with Ernst Haeckel. So, yeah, I just made the video is basically about how wrong he is. That Ernst Haeckel didn't say what he thinks he said, and and modern people don't accept Haeckel's theory either. So it was all pretty silly.
That's pretty much all creationists do, though. It's not as though they could argue against actual evolution. So they create a rather ridiculous parody of it and parade that around until their victims think that that's what you're actually proposing. It's pretty much their only tactic.
Yeah, and the other thing they do is they don't accept any corrections. So
no, especially not from godless heathens.
Right. But I was arguing about this misinterpretation of Haeckel and the misappropriation of Haeckel for modern biology. 20 years ago, I was pounding the keyboard all about this stuff way back then. So he's just reciting this same crap that he got from Jonathan Wells, and that he probably had before even that. Then that there's this long history of creationists distorting the actual history of science.
Yeah. Absolutely. Actually, I had a question about that with relationship to Kent Hovind.
Can I just interject a little bit, because for some reason YouTube had a delay, so we started late. People didn't see the intros, didn't see anything, so no clue.
Are we on now?
Yeah, we're live now. I have no clue what happened, but at least we're live now. It started live about the moment when PC started talking, so I don't think they missed anything important. So okay, well,
I do have this one question, because Hovind is a little outdated even among creationists. Ken Ham has moved on to the ridiculous idea of observational and historical science. But Hovind was the one who, and his son still peddles the 6 types of evolution idiocy. Incidentally, that's why I bought the wine I bought today. In the Okanagan Valley, off on a little hill, there's a winery called Blasted Church Winery. And because he doesn't know the difference between that and evolution anyway, I got the Big Bang Theory.
Yeah, okay.
So do you know if he was the one that started that 6 types of evolution hoax, where he tried to wrap everything in all sciences that didn't work with creationism into evolution, even if it was physics?
I don't know. I'm trying to think back to Ron Number's book. That's where you'd find a good factually based account of where these ideas came from. And I don't remember that one coming up, but it's been a while since I read it.
Fair enough. Well, it is a dead horse he's still beating, but
I think that would be. I think that would be a question for RJ. RJ keeps track of who comes up with an argument first, and then who subsequently feeds off of this. And we know that Hovind isn't. Yeah, Hovind isn't original. RJ debated him, and I think was one of the few who got to throw him off of his script, because he was so off he completely forgot to end the debate with his usual prayer. And RJ kept calling him a bottom feeder, which he didn't like. So he called RJ the altar boy of atheism, which may or may not have led to me making a Photoshop as where RJ is an actual altar boy. But yeah, So
cross upside down or something, or
no, he's
does he have
literally an altar boy at the hand of a priest. So he's a little boy at the hand. It was kind of a weird picture. I must admit, but I mean, hey, we need to do is if we're going to make fun of others, we can also make fun of ourselves when that's appropriate. So, and RJ loved the picture, so no harm done.
Uh-huh.
But
yeah, when Ken Hovind put on his little show, he drug out an old picture of me that was taken by Boris Zivkovic at the Lindau meetings many years ago. And I was just lying back and relaxing with a beer in my hand and laughing and having a good time. And every time somebody wants to make fun of me, they find that picture. It's not a particularly attractive picture, but it makes me look like Bacchus, like Dionysius or something. I think I kind of like it that way, so I never complain when they do.
I love that.
To be fair, Hovind does that whenever he criticizes someone. He does try to come up with the most ridiculous picture he can find online, or at least what he thinks of as being ridiculous. So one thing I wanted to get back to. So what stood out for me is that he was referring to you as the blogger, and obviously you have a famous blog. Links are below in the description, which is called Pharyngula, and he thinks that that's exactly the same thing as what Ernst Haeckel proposed. While there is, I would say there is quite a difference between the two. So can you explain for Kent Hovind the difference between ontology recapitulates ontogeny and Pharyngula?
Recapitulates phylogeny and actual biology.
Yes. I actually made this point in my reply to him, is that he's confusing the observation with the interpretation. He likes to accuse us of doing this. You know, it's a common argument that, oh, well, we're all looking at the same evidence. It's just a difference in how we interpret it and all this stuff. The Pharyngula is a genuine, real, observable, measurable stage in development. So that happened to be the stage of development I was most interested in studying. In zebrafish, that's around 18 to 24 hours. So there's all kinds of cool stuff happening at that moment in the embryo's life, all kinds of assembly going on. But you can't argue that it doesn't exist. On the other hand, Haeckel was making this argument that recapitulation occurs so that we, for instance, go through a fish stage in our development, which is false. We don't. We do go through a Pharyngula stage. So he's conflating the observation with the interpretation, so he can accurately say that the interpretation of Haeckel was wrong, but then he goes on to pretend that his refutation of Haeckel therefore means that we do not have gill slits, or as I prefer to call them, pharyngeal arches. So he's just got everything backwards.
Of
Makes
course.
no sense.
He contradicted himself a couple times too. When I was a kid being taught this bullshit, I was also taught, oh, it's just wrinkles in the neck because the head's all curved around, which, fine. I mean, I didn't know any better. I was fucking 8, 6. I don't even know. But the actual, he seems to comment on gills, gill slits, gill sacs, as if they're all the same thing, as if a precursor version that's gill-like is the same thing as a fully developed gill that you're actually breathing through. And he that's honestly, that's kind of his whole shtick, not being able to distinguish between the beginning stages of something and the whole thing.
Yes, and he also tries to mislead the audience by saying, "Oh, they're just folds of skin. They're just wrinkles in your neck."
Yeah, that's what I was told. And yet he
but
also says they turn into bones in your ear.
Well,
How can they be bones?
the fun part is
yeah.
because I watched the video where so Whack and Atheist PZ Myers just earlier today. What he does, he pulls up several pictures that he has taken from textbooks that will tell him that while they're calling it gill slits, they also have the explanation what they turn into. And he makes it as if he made some great discovery while it's already there in the textbooks, and he's still criticizing it. So one question I did want to ask you, PC. In the textbooks, they keep referring to this as gill slits. Do you think that is why is that?
Oh, well, personally, I think it's a terrible name to call them by because it's just misleading and confusing. Most of the textbooks do not use that phrase. Some of the older ones do. A few probably still do because textbooks are conservative, and we know that all things conservative are bad. But anyway, it's got an elaborate structure there. It is not just folds of skin. There's endoderm, ectoderm, mesoderm there. There's respiratory and circulatory structure. They're not respiratory structures yet, but there is circulatory system invading in through them. They have a pretty intricate, detailed, histology. So they're kind of important that way. But what do you call something like that? It's something for which we do not have a colloquial term in adult humans because humans do not have a long history of opening up pregnant women and looking at their babies. Right?
No.
Yeah, ooh. So these things are sort of primordial structures in the sense that they're going to give rise to a whole bunch of derived structures. And so they're there early on. They're important. You don't want to lose them. If you lost, you wouldn't have a face below the nose, right? So they're kind of essential. And that's the whole curious thing about them. Why do all chordates go through this stage where they build this network, this basket along here, and then go to all the trouble of rearranging it to make jaws and ear bones and structures like that? And the explanation is historical, right? That's they are derived from embryonic structures that have a particularly fixed pattern of development to produce those adult structures. But anyway, it means that as adults having a history of the English language did not ever have to build a set of words to describe that phenomenon.
Yeah, also,
so people
is it safe to say that it's just a name that was given to it, pretty much like we have mitochondrial Eve, which doesn't refer to the actual Eve.
Yeah.
Which they've been pretending. It's insane. It's like, oh, scientists are being mildly poetic. The pillars of creation. No, we don't actually mean Genesis is true. It's just a really cool picture. Stop it.
Yes. Yeah. And the people who first discovered these pharyngeal structures, and it could have been Carl Ernst von Baer for all I know. Anyway, a long time ago, figuring this stuff out. They don't have reference. And they kind of look like the repeating, the serial structures that form the gills of fish. So floundering for words, okay, it's gill slits, gill pouches, gill arches, something like that. Even though they're not involved with gills at all at these early stages.
Do they become gills in fish later, vertebrates?
In fish, they do.
Okay, so
yeah.
So there's the connection, however distant. for us.
Yes, and that's kind of what you'd expect from evolution, to get these transformations over time. So, for example, in fish, those same pharyngeal arches also make a batch of tissue that's in there that has the same functions as our thyroid gland, and the thyroid gland is derived from these tissues converging on the midline to make that particular gland. So it's okay. That's just where they come from. You could also argue that they aren't really pharyngeal arches, because pharynx refers to a feeding structure, and these things don't feed either. Where our embryos never go through a filter feeding stage where they are living on plankton in the uterus.
Oh, thank goodness. I wouldn't want to have plankton inside my
Yes.
uterus. It just seems incredibly awkward. But I have to say, this is very reflective of the entire creationist strategy, which I'm sure you've observed. They talk about like changes in kind, as though evolution means that you jump around between the branches of the tree of life like a monkey, as opposed to, no, things grow and diverge. They will not understand that, no matter how simply you put it. I've seen their brain just go, against a wall, just stop. And they won't understand it. You're actually trained mentally to avoid understanding that very simple concept. And it's one of the reasons I didn't have the slightest clue what evolution was when I didn't believe it. But I thought I did, which was the problem. And I've never met a creationist who could explain evolution in the slightest sensible way. They can't even tell me why griffins are impossible according to the history of evolution of life on Earth. Like, exactly. I know you're an evolutionary biologist and you are very well versed in these things. I am not, and I can explain that. That is not a PhD level evolutionary question.
Yeah, we don't merge lineages that much, so you can't just generate a chimera from two highly derived forms. So you're not going to see that. There's a million misconceptions they've got that they think are the true face of evolution, which makes it frustrating to argue with them, because you're constantly telling them, no, that's not evolution. Yes, that is wrong, but it's not evolution. They don't care.
And so the biggest problem and again, I watched the video today, and so I saw Ken pull up his references. You get the impression that the older the science book, the more qualified it is on the topic, which is in science is the exact opposite, because you want to have the newest science book instead of the old ones, and he keeps going back to papers that were written 100 years ago or older, to textbooks.
Outdated and disproven information. I have never heard of this before. This is my top face. I am so shocked.
That is the big problem, and for some reason, young Earth creationists don't get it, that science is fluid and that new information comes in. And what really irks me is the fact that Hovind keeps saying that Haeckel's embryos are the only valid evidence for evolution, which to me is stunning, because we know so much more. And that's the part I don't get.
Yeah. Darwin said that embryology was the best class of facts in favor of his theory. So, and I still think that's true, but then I'm kind of biased that way. But he wasn't talking about Haeckel's theory of recapitulation. He was talking about the observations, as I mentioned earlier, the observations that embryos show these traits that resemble those of embryos of other lineages. That as you get younger and younger embryos, they converge. They look more similar to one another, because they're going back towards a simpler, more general form.
From which everything is derived.
Yes. So he was when he cited that in The Origin, he was citing Karl Ernst von Baer. And Karl Ernst von Baer was an amazing embryologist. He saw things that everyone else struggled to find. He revolutionized a lot of ideas about embryology. Interestingly, he also totally despised Haeckel.
Oh no. So Darwin was on the other side of the Haeckel divide debate, but we wouldn't
Yes.
want to mention that because Darwin, evil, evolution, Nazis, Hitler, and something, your
Yes.
children will all shoot up a
So some of Darwin's letters, for instance, refer to Haeckel, and Darwin had this impression of this extremely bombastic German, and it gave him a headache to listen to Haeckel. Haeckel came to visit Darwin, for instance, and Darwin was polite and respectful, but you get the impression he didn't really appreciate this visit. That Haeckel was not his kind of guy.
It's ironic because I don't know about you, but I certainly get a headache listening to Kent Hovind.
Oh. So he and Haeckel would have gotten along famously.
Very likely. Actually, they probably both would have bombastically yelled at each other for about 6 hours and then declared they won and took a share of the profits.
Yes, although this is also unfair to Haeckel because Haeckel was actually a pretty smart and amazing guy. He was a great artist. Lots of his art is hanging on dorm room walls because he did these amazing, intricate drawings of coelenterates, for instance, and crabs, and they look like real Baroque art when you actually see them. But also he was a very brave adventurer. He went to all these places. He was active in New Guinea, for instance. He was out there exploring. He'd go to all these exotic places to do collecting. He was behind the Glomar Challenger expedition. So he's also doing oceanography. And
wow.
So, yeah, he's
perhaps near the type of man who's best enjoyed outdoors.
Yes. He was also really cool looking in his safari hat and his fancy uniform when he was out trotting around the world. The other thing I kind of like about Haeckel is that he was very much a pacifist.
Interesting.
The creationists will sometimes say that, Haeckel was the Nazis' favorite scientist. No, he wasn't. And the Nazis would not have appreciated him much at all because he was a pacifist. His son died in World War I. And for the few years he outlasted World War I, he was heavily into pacifist causes. So also not exactly Hitler's best buddy. So
no, and so do we need to mention that one of the books that was banned by the Nazis is a book from a guy named Charles Darwin?
Yeah.
Funny. Yeah. I've never heard that they banned the Bible. Did the Nazis ever ban the Bible?
No,
I have not heard that.
No, they didn't.
So they banned Origin of Species, but not the Bible, but evil Hitler, bad evolution because reasons shut up, God is mysterious.
Yeah.
Yes, also the Nazis were mostly Christian.
Yeah.
Germany was predominantly Lutheran. That's the rank and file were devout Lutherans. Hitler himself he was constantly quoting the Bible and spouting the virtues of he was kind of like Donald Trump that way. Yeah, so it's
hold it upside down for a photo op.
Yeah,
no, Hitler was smarter than that. He
was smarter than Trump. At least he could hold the Bible the right way.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's another thing that bugs me because they like to tell people, well, Hitler wasn't a real Christian because reasons, and then you got Trump, and obviously he's a Christian. He can't cite a single Bible verse. He can't even say which part of the Bible he likes best, whether it's the Old or the New Testament. So, but one thing that
John 3:16, that shit, everyone knows that one.
yeah. So one thing I did want to touch on the whole thing with Haeckel, because as far as I know, Haeckel did receive some backlash over the drawings that he did.
Yes.
But it is. Am I correct in saying that it's not what the creationists put forward to be? Because as far as I know, Haeckel was criticized because he left parts out and resized the embryos to make them look more alike. Isn't that exactly what happened?
Yes, primarily what Haeckel was doing, and this is what Richardson corrected with his photographs, is Haeckel was snipping out the yolk sacs. They don't count, right? So yolk sacs got removed from his embryos, and that led to distortions of the embryos. Yeah, and made them look more similar, because that's one of the primary differences in early development between these different species is presence of yolk or not, and how the yolk is divided during division. So that was misleading. There was also the figure that got him in real hot water, though, was one where he was misleading about the structure of myotomes, which nobody ever talks about. But it was a legitimate tweaking of the data. And
it was interpretive.
Yes. And it's not the kind of thing I would ever condone. He was actually biasing the data to favor his hypothesis. So that was bad. And he got jumped on for this stuff, and that was rightful. Of course, the thing is, this was in the days before photomicrography. So what does he have to do? He has to sit there and use a camera lucida, for instance, and draw this. And somebody else who was working at roughly the same time was Ramon E. Cajal, the famous neuroanatomist. And Cajal would make his observations. He might do a few sketches and a few notes, and all these glorious figures he published in his books of neuroanatomy, he would compose at home after coming home from work and sit by his fireplace and draw these things freehand, trying to capture, the imagery, and translating
of the real. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Amazing.
And nobody ever accuses Cajal of plagiarism or faking his data. Partly because he did such a good job of it. I mean, you can go back. You can go back to some of his original slides even, and see that the structures are there just as he sketched them. This is not to excuse Haeckel, because Cajal did not paint in things that weren't there, but he was drawing from memory. And Haeckel just fudged everything to fit his model, and that's not good.
That's not good. Although, in fairness, it's not like he had, the microscopes we have today, or anything of that nature. And so, it's, I don't know. There also is a lack of there's a lack of awareness that a diagram for, say, a teaching textbook is meant to point out specific traits as opposed to be photorealistic.
Right. And these were basically diagrams that were colored by his hypotheses. So, you can't use those as evidence for recapitulation. But, the other thing is that years later, when was it, the 90s, Michael Richardson sits down and takes careful photographs of all these things and documents the deviations from Haeckel's models that were present in these embryos, and also made some other important points like, hey, the pharyngula stage does not seem to always occur at the same time. The components can develop at different rates. Really cool stuff, important stuff. And the way scientists regarded that was, hooray, great, new data.
Yeah.
This is exciting. I'm glad somebody sat down and did this.
Amazing. We can fill in the gaps that we didn't with the things and the stuff and oh yay, new data. Yeah, that's not the creationist attitude to anything.
No.
Sorry.
So what I had a few key words in the talks that we just had, which was dishonesty and photographic proof. I want to point out a little screenshot that I took from the video, which is this one. The 12-week embryo, obviously a human, and so Hovind thinks this is accurate, and this is exactly where Hovind is pretty much copying Ernst Haeckel, because if we go on the internet and we go to Snopes, we will find the following. Is this a real picture of a 12-week-old embryo? Well, turns out it's not. It is, and I'll point it out, it's a hand-painted resin doll. So it is not a 12-week-old embryo. And just for comparison, we do have a picture. It's a little bit small, but we do have a picture of a 12-week-old embryo. And obviously, Hovind has no problem with showing all of this. And that's kind of weird, because if you go on Google, you can actually find another picture where they're holding the same thing in a way that it's obviously not an embryo, but it's a hard substance that it's made out of, because you couldn't hold an embryo between your fingers like that, because it wouldn't work, because they're kind of flexible as living creatures are. So
they're also slimy and soft. And smeary.
Very.
If you hold a 12-week embryo in your hand, you're gonna, half of it is gonna be left behind, stuck to your palm.
It's
that gelatinous.
And another thing that I came up with is this picture of a 12-week-old embryo, and we can see that it absolutely doesn't resemble anything close to what Hovind is showing. So I
don't think those black bulge beginnings of eyes look much like the eyes of the little baby going.
No, we can compare them. So
not so much.
Here's the one that Hovind shows, and here's an actual picture. It's kind of different.
Tiny newborn.
Yeah. So let's start with. As you say, take out the lies out of the textbooks. How about taking the lies out of the creationist videos? And we can start with this pictures, and we do have a little bit more to follow.
So basically, there'll be an introduction of Kent and where he works, and then there'll be him finishing the video, and that'll be it.
Yeah. Well, I'm still hoping. I'm still hoping to get Kent Hovind back on the show, and maybe we can talk about all of this, because there seem to be some lies in the creationist literature as well. I mean, have you come across anything like that, PZ?
Have I come across lies from creationists?
Also, have you come across sand at the beach?
No, it's all they're all lying. I mean, and you look at one of the other things I've been confronted with is Islamic apologists telling me that the Quran has the complete history of human embryos, in scientifically accurate detail.
That brings me back of a little video clip. I think that was shot in London, where you were entering a building and then were
that was Dublin. Yes.
Oh, in Dublin, yeah.
Dublin, Ireland. Yeah, Ireland is not the same thing as England. We know that.
Let's not talk about what's part of England and what is not. I did an 8-hour live stream on a Young Earth Creationist channel talking about how the Queen is the Queen of Canada and British subjects can go to Canada without a passport, which turned out to be completely fake. So let's not talk about anything like that. I've done that. But no, so in Dublin, you were approached by a Muslim Young Earth Creationist who wanted to ask you questions about embryology, and then you said, well, I'm an embryologist, and he immediately switched to cosmology, which I thought was brilliant. So, okay, you can answer me. Let's talk about something different now, because now I've got a problem.
Yeah, that was an interesting moment, but it was very familiar. I mean, there's been lots of occasions where I've talked to creationists, and they, sometimes when I would give talks, there would be creationists in the audience who would have these long lists of questions that they prepared ahead of time. And they would start on the biology stuff, and I'd start shooting them down instantly, and they'd look up in shock and immediately change to geology or physics or something, which was farther down in the paper. So I've run into that multiple times. It's so familiar.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I have to say, I have to say,
I'm not a scientist.
I didn't figure this out myself. I saw this on a video that On Ra made, and he put up that claim. And since I've seen that, I've been looking out whether or not that happens. And so when you talk to a creationist and the creationist gets the feeling that you actually know what you're talking about, they will change the subject. That is pretty much every creationist I have talked to so far. So you can say you cannot generalize, but at least the people that I've talked to, they will immediately switch topics when they figure out.
It's a very consistent behavioral trait. I will say I am not a scientist myself, but I do have a remarkable memory. And since I tend to listen to, qualified individuals such as yourself, I'm able to, I'm able to keep on hand enough information to discredit what creationists are saying, which I do not consider a very high level of anything. But I basically, that's essentially what I do. And they just, the minute I appear to know anything, because of course their arguments never change. So it's very easy to be armed against them because it's the same thing they've been saying since the 70s. Oh no, is there a refutation out there? I think I can find one. And yet the minute that I do that, they jump to something completely unrelated and abandon the previous topic as though they had no responsibility to actually conclude that point or even understand it.
The other thing that goes on with that kind of interaction is, when they switch to volcanology and start asking me questions about volcanology, my usual response is to say, I don't know. I haven't studied that. That's way outside my field of expertise. But for some reason, these bozos feel like they are experts in every single subject. So they have no shame, no hesitation about coming at you with questions, a million miles outside their educational expertise. So that's also one of the aggravations of dealing with these people is they're uniformly pretty ignorant and they're uniformly pretty dishonest about it.
It's very Dunning-Kruger. I can remember the exact moment. I'm pretty sure this was the moment that Richard Dawkins decided I'm never speaking to a creationist again, when he was speaking to an Australian a politician I'm not familiar with the man, but he thought that his gotcha question was, if dogs evolved from this primitive goop, what did they do until they developed a urethra, essentially? How did they expel waste? As though evolution meant there were just these balls of meat rolling around somewhere for 1,000,000,000,000 years. And then eventually they were dogs, and there were two of them because reasons. And now we have dogs. So that's evolution.
I can't remember the guy's name, but he literally refused to tell on that particular TV show that he was a young Earth creationist because of his position at that time in the Australian government.
Only a young Earth creationist would ask a question that stupid.
Yeah.
I don't even think a child would do that.
And that's I think the level that's even, I would even say is below Kent Hovind, because I've never heard Kent Hovind make that argument. That is the level of Ray Comfort, where Ray Comfort will just say, so we at some point in history we got a dog, and now this dog is frantically looking around for a female dog to marry, because obviously dogs marry. I haven't seen that before, but it's probably a thing in New Zealand.
Anna Marble conducted a wedding for her dogs. Maybe that was what they were referring to.
And
everything must reproduce sexually.
Yeah,
it's the only way reproduction can occur.
Yeah, and it's dirty. Don't forget that.
Yeah.
And so what did the dog do while it was evolving, trying to figure out a way to expel waste? It's one of the dumbest arguments I've come across. I mean, and
it's become an argument now, but it actually did originate with Kent Hovind. Kent hasn't changed his shtick in decades, and his son has robotically copied him for decades more.
Yeah.
He used to make sarcastic comments like that, and they were just sarcastic enough in his delivery, because condescension is kind of his jam, that you could say he was exaggerating in a mocking tone. But you raise an entire generation of children with his sarcasm being their only impression of actual evolution, and they start to think that's what's really going on.
The fun part,
the
fun part with Hovind is, if you watch his debates, he will still have all of his old stuff. If you watch other videos, it becomes clear that Kent Hovind accepts evolution, because he goes through different stages and says, well, obviously this can happen because it's in God put it in our DNA, so we could develop that particular way. He accepts pretty much everything. One of his famous things is a dog doesn't produce a non-dog, but he is on video saying that dogs came from wolves. So obviously, at some point, a wolf produced a non-wolf. So,
but it was still dog kind. Come on, you're not going to do that.
There are two facts that will expose, I've noticed, at least in my own experience, will expose the ignorance of any creationist. If you explain to them that there were never a first two of any animal according to evolution, and that according to evolution, no species ever produced offspring that were no individuals ever produced offspring that were a different species than their parents. They think that those are facts that refute evolution, as opposed to being the foundation of the entire fucking concept.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we do have a question from the side chat from Aaron Charitier. He had another question which I will bring up later because it's a little bit off topic, but he asked, how do you keep so cool amongst all of these bad creationist scientists?
Yes, please tell us.
The secret. Oh, yeah, no, I can't give that away. Then I'd lose my... No, it's okay. You mentioned earlier about Richard Dawkins and his moment of silence when he realized that these were creationists interviewing him. And the thing is, Richard Dawkins is kind of a genteel scholar. He doesn't get out much. He's not really out there in the hurly-burly, battling it out with the creationists. He's nice and aloof that way. And that's kind of why he's shocked. The same things have happened to me where I suddenly realized, oh, these interviewers are creationists. And the thing is, I am so used to these people that I'm sitting here and I'm already prepared to shoot down everything they might bring up. That they can bring up any old obscure thing from the creationist literature, and I will have encountered it and thought about it and be prepared to pounce on them if they trot it out too. So
my parents were horrified when I did that with them. And I'm going, they're like, how do you know? Are you just making this up? I'm like, no, the same arguments have been circulating for half a century. I was able to find rebuttals. I is to smarts.
Yep. So, I mentioned that these creationists often have these long lists of questions for me. And there have been several occasions where I've stunned them into silence because they start marching through these. And not only can I answer them, I can cite the papers that they're talking about. So, within my domain.
Your next question, you're going to say.
Yes. And when you've got that kind of toolkit under your hands, you're ready for anything. And that really helps keep
It's almost like experience gives predictive power.
Yeah. And it's also almost like the creationists have no new arguments. So
no. You would think completely ignoring and refusing to understand their opponent's rebuttals for 100 years would have provided them with so many new arguments.
It's really weird. The fact that you now got people who are literally saying the exact same thing as Hovind, and I'm not saying that they're coming up with the same arguments, they are verbatim saying the exact same things. Vice Rhino did
discount Kent Hovind.
Yeah, did a video on discount Kent Hovind, and you got sexy Kent Hovind now, which
really?
Yeah, sexy Kent Hovind.
Do that.
Sexy Kent Hovind is a thing now too. But these are people that are literally saying the exact same thing. It's as if they've had Kent Hovind's DVDs on repeat and then came up with the exact same wording, so they could just, off their memory, just recite what Hovind said.
People who have some natural intelligence and were raised in this cult, they have very little capacity for their mind to expand into other avenues, because we can't do that or we go to hell. So they often turn their mind towards aspects of memorization. And this can make them feel that they have some expertise when they don't. And then they can regurgitate things, and all the people who have been indoctrinated similarly will smile and nod and be very happy for them, because that's our champion, even though none of them have any clue what any of them said, and wouldn't understand or be able to define half the words that they used, because definitions bring clarity, and we cannot have that. We are creationists. Shut up. Although I did think of a quote I wanted to share with you after watching the video, Dr. Meyer, because I noticed that every few minutes he was calling you a liar and saying, oh, you blah, 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 trying to badmouth you. And basically is this 1,000 different variants of I'm as good as you are. You just, meh. And it made me think of actually C.S. Lewis and the Screwtape Letters, because although the theology behind that is somewhat intriguing in an unfortunate way, he did make several observations of the human race that were quite interesting. And he said that the interesting thing about the phrase I'm as good as you is that it's false on its own terms. Nobody who says I'm as good as you believes it. The Saint Bernard never says it to the toy dog, nor the genius to the idiot, nor the pretty woman to the plain. It always comes from a position of inferiority. And I have to say, watching Mr. Hovind, he appears to be feeling that inferiority very strongly.
Yes. Yeah, he's doing a lot of compensation out there.
Mm.
Well,
how does it feel to be the man so much better equipped than your opponents?
I have another question from the side chat, another one from Iron Charioteer. And people, if you have a question for me, please tag me in so I can pitch the question to PZ. He says, how does the average layman tackle creationism's bad ideas?
Uh-huh. I have a simple answer for that. And the correction to creationist bad ideas is simply honesty and integrity. If you're a layman and somebody confronts you with this wild idea about creationism, you say, I don't know. I don't know anything about that particular subject. I guess I'll go look it up. And then, of course, another part of that is when you go to look it up, don't go to Answers in Genesis or Creation Science Evangelism. Go to a real source and look it up. There's this idea that the only way to deal with creationists is with some quick, witty, clever comeback, and if you're not prepared to do that, they're going to beat you. But I've always found that just simple honesty takes you miles. It gets you very far. When somebody hits me with that geology stuff, and I say, I don't know geology, then I win on points just because I'm honest enough to admit it, and they are not.
Yeah. And so
I could always refer to a geologist, but
for the average
they
layman,
never seem willing to take me up on that.
Yeah.
For the average layman, stick around to the end of the show, because if you want to know how to tackle, we do promote a book later on. And so there's also the links in the description where you can go to PZ's channel, his blog, and follow him on Twitter. And so one question I've never asked, have you ever written a book about creationist arguments, PZ?
No, I haven't. I wrote my one atheist book, and that was enough for me because, I'm so burnt out on atheism for many reasons. And no, I've got it in my head to write a book about developmental biology.
Ooh.
So coming at it from just, the angle of my specialty. Then, of course, Neil Shubin goes and writes it.
Oh. But did it say what you were going to say, or did it just have the same thing?
Oh, he said many of the same things. So I would say now just go read Neil Shubin. He's a great writer, and he is also a combination developmental biologist and paleontologist. So he's got a lot of insight into these sorts of things. I actually got to know his work first as a developmental biologist, and then he starts getting into this evolution stuff, which was pretty cool.
I have to say, I'm really sad that I missed out on evolution for so many years, because when you understand, actual evolution to any degree whatsoever, as opposed to the creationist ridiculous straw men that make no sense and all contradict each other, it's actually really cool and really interesting and brilliantly simple and reasonable. And it's amazing. I feel so gypped that I was cheated out of so many years of understanding and exploring this concept that, at the base, it's very simple, but there's lots of, intriguing and nuanced side paths you can go off into. I mean, you've been covering embryology for how many years? So very long time.
Oh, I've been a developmental biologist for 40 years now. So yes, I know I don't look that old, but it's...
No, not at all. I would have said you were starting at 2, but
yes, something like that.
So what I do miss is you used to give talks on certain platforms, and for people who aren't aware, you actually had a fair amount of comedy in all of your talks, which is why I absolutely love them. to do a talk on science for a lot of people who are laymen and might not be that particularly interested. That does help because it will draw people in if you can actually put in a few jokes as well. And those are the things that I really miss. I would really like to see you on a stage more often talking about things like this because.
Oh yes.
Yeah, I'm willing, but it's not going to happen because I got blackballed some years ago when it was discovered that I was a feminist.
Oh dear.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Not equality. Oh, the apocalypse.
I
Hey,
know.
you know what? Use the expanse of the Me Too movement.
Oh.
Now is the time.
I better be quiet then because I'm about to be blackballed then as well. If that's
well, save yourself.
Yeah.
So
no, it was a really remarkable thing about 10 years ago that immediately after I exposed Michael Shermer publishing a letter from a woman he raped. It was shocking how abruptly everything got canceled.
I followed Michael Shermer. I was not familiar with this story, mind you, but 10 years ago.
Well, see, he's
fighting my way out of Christianity.
No, his tactics are effective. He's very litigious, so he threatened to sue me. He threatened to sue other people. He's had several occasions. There was one was it last year or the year before? He was engaged to speak at a university. He still gets these engagements. I don't, but he still gets them. And somebody revealed in the college paper his rather sordid history and his unfortunate reputation with young women. And he started throwing lawyers at everybody. It was just, oops.
Well, I can speak from experience. If you're honest and if you're not holding back on certain things, it doesn't make you popular. That's
no, darling. The truth doesn't always win.
Yeah,
it would be good if it does, but we don't live in a fantasy novel.
And that is still a thing that I like to see change in the atheist community. If someone comes up with something, at least try and go and fact check. I mean, you talk to creationists, to theists, and you want them to fact check. You should do the same thing for your fellow atheists. If they come up with a claim, see if it's valid, yes or no. And that is still a thing that I think we could all improve on.
Yes. Just that, some of these things hit on very deep-seated prejudices, that racism and misogyny are still out there. And the people who hold those views are fanatical about defending them.
I can tell you the number of times I've been referred to by one of our guests as that woman. I actually went to support Peter on a podcast with a particularly stupid creationist, which might be the reason he refused to speak to me without my husband present. I don't have one of those. And I mean,
you fallen woman.
Oh yeah, no. Well, technically, I am divorced, but it's you. But that's like
PZ. She is called Lilith. That should be a clue as to where she. Of course,
he was pathetic, and I dumped his ass. I mean, obviously, but Adam's first wife. Here's to all the women who liberated themselves from truly pathetic men. But at the same time, it was like. Even Mike Pence, who refuses to be in a room alone with a woman because, I don't know, maybe he's a rape addict who can't go off the wagon cold turkey or something. I have no idea.
He needs permission from mother. I'm pretty sure he needs permission from mother.
Yeah, that's really creepy. But even he doesn't pretend that I could somehow sexually assault him over the internet.
Yeah. that particular person is a mystery to me, because what is he going to do if he's in an accident and the emergency workers are women? He's going to have
Oh,
a
sweetie,
really,
only people can be doctors.
I don't know. I don't know.
That's what it's mind.
But
Yeah.
so
Well, I won't mourn him if if he turns away emergency medical treatment because they're women.
yeah,
That sounds like a good thing.
we still
I
so one of the
agree
good
with you.
things that came out of Darwin is that we also have a Darwin Award, which some people might really want to be up for. Um,
Yeah.
Oddly, they
don't know.
seem more willing to refuse medical treatment for their children than themselves in that situation.
Yeah, and
Sadly.
it's also a thing where people like Benny Hinn, who can pretty much heal everyone and then get a heart condition and fly around the world to find the best medical doctors to fix their heart condition, which somewhat interferes with what they've been telling people. It's
I know what
Uh-huh.
healers like that
fun.
do to people who are genuinely sick, and Benny Hinn had better never meet me.
Nope. And
Yeah.
we do have someone like we had someone like that who was quite popular in Holland. I'm glad she's no longer in the business. But yes, she convinced one of my favorite comedians to not seek medical help when she had breast cancer, and so
Oh,
um,
yeah.
we lost her at the age of, I think she was 40 or 41. Um, it's horrific what these people can do. But
Uh-huh.
anyway, another thing that I wanted to discuss is, and let's get back to a little bit more of a light subject than all of this grim stuff. Um, in the developing embryo, do we or do we not have a tail, and is a tail an extension of the vertebra? That's because
Yes to both.
Isn't that what a tail is? I thought that's what a tail is. Are they not
Yes.
made of vertebrae?
yeah.
With the and the monkeys and the curving and the
Well,
past the pelvis.
Yeah.
the reason I bring that up is because Hovind famously says that we need our coccyx. It's there for a reason. It's not a tail. Um, I have pulled it up at the moment, so I can hold on. We need to go there. There is a site called coccyx.org, um, which
Of course there.
deals with all the problems that you can have with your coccyx, and it is a fairly regular thing that people have their coccyx removed. So whenever Kent Hovind makes this claim, I will pay for you to have yours removed, I think we should get him in touch with the people who run this website and make a specific page where they can link to, so that everyone who needs the money for their operation can then go to Kent Hovind and just tell him, well, you made that claim. Could you please pay for my operation as well? Because, hey, Kent Hovind, it actually is a thing. Some people
Yeah.
need to have it removed because they have chronic pains that will inhibit them from doing anything. So if that's
He
a
thinks
good
that
offer,
vestigial is entirely useless. The coccyx is vestigial as a tail.
yes.
He
Yes.
doesn't be able to comprehend this concept. Please
Well,
correct me if I'm wrong. If
no,
anything about biology
what
is
they
slightly
don't
wrong.
what they don't get is the definition of vestigial. Vestigial doesn't mean useless. It means it used to have a function and it now has a different function. It no longer serves the function that it had before. And that's the part
So
that
it's
creationists
useless
don't
for
get.
its old function.
Yes. Am I correct on this, BT? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, that's what it is. It's the fact that we have a vestigial tail means that because it's vestigial, we can no longer use it to swing from tree branches. Yeah,
Or carry
we
groceries.
can't use it. We can't use it in courtship displays. It's really unfortunate.
Unfortunately, some men still feel the need to show a tail in courtship display.
No, that's not a tail. That's a biologist is telling you. That's something different.
That's a thing in DMs on Twitter and Facebook, I think.
Yeah, that's ventral. Tails are dorsal.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. How could I possibly make the mistake between ventral and dorsal?
Yeah.
All unsolicited dick pickers beware.
And I also think that it's not as pleasing to the eye as a display where a monkey actually uses its tail for courtship. I would really hate to see that. So if you walk out into the center of town and you see certain guys trying to attract women, I do not think that would be a pretty sight. Sorry.
Well,
I'm male.
There's an evolutionary reason for that, though, and that is because we have spent so many generations hiding them. There hasn't been an opportunity to select for particularly beautiful penises.
So what you're saying, if I'm understanding correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that if men would display their penises more and we women selected for the best penises, they would get prettier?
That would be the idea. It might take a long time, like a few 100,000 years, but we should start. We should start soon.
Ugly or insufficient penises become incels, and then they're unpleasant, very unpleasant.
But they aren't allowed to. They aren't allowed to reproduce, so they're eventually lost in this evolutionary perspective. We're thinking long term here,
Fair enough.
Fair enough. Geologically.
And I'm sorry. It had nothing to do with the conversation. Recently, there was a bit of a ruckus about a certain stream on YouTube where there was talked about penises. I think this one was a lot better. Having Lilith and PC talk about pleasing penises is a lot better than what I've seen.
Was it about the baculum or the
No.
Let's a few men still
not
retain apparently.
No, let's not go in there. It has to do with another famous name in the community.
Okay, all right.
So let's just pretend
and
that didn't
to
happen.
the Bacchus of evolution, long may you reign. And
drinking
bring us
water
joy with your intoxicating beverages. Well, it's early.
We do have another question, and one that I'm a little bit curious about. PC, did you get a chance to read The Rocks Were There?
Yes, I've got it on my Kindle right now. So, I've been working my way through it.
You chose for the light version. Have you seen the book?
The actual physical book?
Yes.
No, I haven't. But then that would be. I
That's
veer away from
good,
those things.
That's a pretty good weapon against creationists because that'll kill you if you get hit by that. I mean, I made the commercial and I couldn't find a 3D element
you with
to
the Bible,
use.
you hit them with the rocks are there.
I couldn't find a book thick enough so it would accurately represent the rocks were there, and so it has 300 pages of references and sources. That's just reference and sources.
Wow.
I mean,
damn.
Uh-huh.
So, but what's
So
your impression? That I would really like to hear that.
Oh, what's my impression? It's an excellent reference book, but as you mentioned, it's really hefty, and it's kind of daunting. So I haven't finished it. I've been reading it off and on over the last month or two. So, and that's because it is pretty daunting. So, for instance, I mentioned Neil Shubin's books they're qualitatively different. The Rocks Are There tries to put everything in there, so it's at your fingertips if you need it. And somebody like Neil Shubin or Sean Carroll, when they write about evolution, are focusing on one specific aspect, which makes it a little bit more readable for the casual person. But sure, you're right. This is a book you could whack creationists with really hard.
It's a bit like you recall The Big Bang Theory and how Sheldon got into string theory. A bully chased him into the library and hit him with the largest book he could find, which was one on string theory. I'm sorry. I know it's but
I've never watched that show.
I still need to get my copy because I'm obviously I'm an idiot. I want a copy that first goes to RJ, and then RJ has to sign it. Then RJ has to ship it to Jackson, and Jackson has to sign it, and then Jackson has to ship it to me. And the reason for that is it's literally the first book on the planet that has a quote of mine in it. So I need to have that book.
Ooh, wow. Okay.
As an absolute layman, to be quoted in a book against creationists, to me that was a goal that's not going to be surpassed. And the fact that it's a book written by RJ and Jackson, that makes it even better.
So you could read the Kindle version and plaque that one on a wall with, framing and
I want to sit back and actually read the actual book. I want to feel how heavy it is. I want to see how thick it actually is, because it's only part 1. They couldn't get everything in there, so there's going to be a volume 2.
Of course they couldn't.
Yeah, Jackson, that's scary.
And Jackson, that was exactly what Jackson said. It's scary having a part 2 because as I said, he's doing it with RJ. RJ is someone who is meticulous and wants everything he knows in that book, so it's going to be there for posterity. So, yeah.
Oh, RJ.
Well, I think what you really need to do is you need to go on tour and come out to Louisiana.
Ooh.
New Orleans is beautiful. It's great. It's got all kinds of interesting culture. And then go up to RJ's in the Palouse, right? Up in Washington State.
Yeah, RJ is up in the north.
Yeah. Yeah, that is beautiful country.
So I could do that. I could start out in Minnesota, where someone
there you go.
That I know, and then from there travel to RJ, and then go down south and pick up the book in Louisiana.
It would make more sense to go to RJ first, then come across country on I-94 to Minneapolis and say hello to me, and then take I-35 due south. Yeah. See, easy.
Yeah.
I've just given you the complete route.
You're so practical.
Yeah, and
it's only about 1,500,
there's another one I would one of my earliest followers lives in Minnesota as well. So that's another one I would really like to shake hands with, because
okay, well, we don't shake hands anymore.
Oh, right. Well, you elbow bump.
No.
But PZ, I do have a question for you, to which I know the answer, but we've already covered it. I need you to verify, because I need verification from an actual evolutionary biologist. Can I just confirm with you that it is in fact impossible, according to the history of evolution on Earth, to end up with a griffin?
It is impossible, but I would just have the caveat that you could imagine independently evolving some. No, it's really hard.
Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah.
Well, it wouldn't have the right features because dinosaurs and mammals and very divergent branches, but maybe something that sort of kind of looked like it in a world where vertebrates were
what you would
not
need is a
quadrupeds, but
what you would need is
I
a
don't know.
vertebrate with
Yeah.
with four limbs to start out with, and then you got the problem.
No,
How are you going?
six limbs.
Sorry.
You
But
gotta have 6 limbs for a
Yeah,
griffin.
six limbs. Sorry, and
the
then
point is,
you,
I actually asked several creationists this, and they said, well, it's not impossible according to evolution because, reasons. And I'm going, okay, the fact that you don't understand that is a pretty good indication you don't know what you're talking about.
the biggest
Right.
problem would probably be to have feathers evolve for a second time and still be feathers. I don't think that
With fur.
with fur.
Yes.
So
Yeah, and also to secondarily evolve a beak.
yeah,
That's a really specialized structure. Like,
And zygodactyl claws in front, but hooves in the back, which are literally just horse be flipping you off, middle finger, nails, essentially.
yeah.
Move. That just doesn't. I mean, you could end up with a 6-limbed creature in a totally divergent evolution of life that had wings, even wings as the 4 limbs for some reason. But a proper griffin, I just, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to think for, with developmental and evolutionary reasons, it's not going to happen. But you've also got against that the whole physiological and ecological aspect of it.
Oh, yeah.
That is not a practical animal that's going to thrive.
Really? There's not a specific niche for the griffin, not even fighting darkspawn in a video game?
In a video game, maybe. That's the only place you could form one of those things. Video games and literature.
Yes.
well, and since we're on to animals, PZ, would you enlighten us? Because people have said in the side chat they really like the animal right behind you, the octopus.
Oh, yes.
For people who do not know what that's all about, there's a purpose to everything behind you, isn't there?
No, it's all random chance. Sorry.
Yes, you see, a griffin actually vomited it out this morning randomly because reasons.
So an evolutionary biologist who has Muppets behind them. There has to be a reason.
Hey, chef, biologists are cool, but please.
Well, the things like the octopus. It's because I have a fascination with cephalopods. So I've got a vast collection of stuffed squid and octopus. That one's just the cuddliest of them. So I keep that. But then also I have a collection of toys behind me because I'm also a grandfather. So when I talk to the granddaughter, I have to. The first thing she will always ask me for is Elmo. So I've got to trot out Elmo for her. Actually, the first thing she usually says to me is grandma, because she needs me to trot grandma out for her. But after that, it's Elmo and Grover.
Well, as long as you don't have any of those, what were they, Tickle Me Elmo dolls that would become very creepy when the batteries ran low.
And I also have this, which is more in line with my current interests. That's a spider puppet. It has lots of legs. It's not a very spidery face, but okay.
No, it has proper eyes, not the.
I have to say this because I spoke to him yesterday. We have a guy in the side chat right now called Brainbug. He has, I think, all the praying mantises that are available on the planet in his collection, and he showed a couple during the hangout we were in last night. So, and I told him you really need to drop by and maybe have a chat with PZ and exchange things about the difference between studying spiders and studying praying mantises. and I, to be fair, they're really cool. He had a really, really big one on his hand at some point. So
Yeah, I've had praying mantises before. I was also really into phasmids, so stick insects, and a lot of those. It turns out that
I
the
had those.
far north, Minnesota is not a great place for these kinds of insects.
How closely are they related to katydids? The phasmids.
Katydids.
The ones that
Oh,
look like
phasmids are very different, completely different branch of the tree. So
it's harder for a poor, unevolved layman like myself to tell with the invertebrates.
Yeah. No, invertebrates are amazingly diverse.
Mm.
One of the reasons I switched from zebrafish research to spider research is just the variety of species that I can go find in my yard right now is kind of awe-inspiring.
Intriguing. Are zebrafish, just for clarification, are they the ones that are sort of see-through, that are kept so often for vertebrate research because they can be studied internally without being killed?
Oh, the adults are not transparent at all. They have silver and black stripes running horizontally.
Hence the
The
name.
embryos, right? Zebra stripes should be this way, right? These are this way.
It's the ocean. There is no
Yeah.
up or down. Everything's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, so
the
that would
embryos
depend.
though,
That would depend how you put the sticks in front of them if you breed them. I learned
right.
that from the Bible.
Yes. Yes.
So,
But the embryos are transparent. That's why I worked with them for so many years, is because, man, you don't need to do any dissection or anything. You can just get the microscope and you look down there and you can focus right through the brain and see all the neurons in there.
Oh my gosh.
It's kind of cool stuff.
well, and what you said earlier brought me back because I had stick insects when I was about 11. I was hooked on the Museum of Natural History. I went there every weekend. I had a year pass, so I went there every weekend. And at some point, the people who worked there knew me, so I was taken into the catacombs where they had all the different stuff that wasn't on display. And they had stick insects in one of their displays, and I kept begging, I want a couple of those. So if they have young, can I have a couple of those? And I finally got them, and then they got out in our house.
Oh.
And so pretty much ruined every plant that they could get their hands on. And
Of course they did.
my mother made me promise that I wouldn't get any new ones because
Oh. I was going to say, all you need is a couple of them, and you will have swarms of phasmids before you know it.
Hundreds. Yes.
It's like
Yeah.
the bunnies. You get two, and
Yeah.
it's like, okay, those are mine, but all the rest are yours.
They're worse than bunnies because you come in one day and you look in the bottle with them, and there's hundreds of eggs just all over the place. So
Yeah. And
We need a predator.
if you don't notice the eggs, you will notice that at some point you've got just hundreds of little stick insects in your tank, and so
and they're
pretty
so
much-
cute.
and you will run out of neighborhood kids who want a stick insect. Just saying that there are only so
Yes,
many kids in
there's
the neighborhood.
hundreds of neighborhood kids who are like, yes, I
Yeah.
want me some stick insects.
Yeah, which also didn't make me really popular with the parents of my friends when I was young, because I would just give out stick
Can't
insects.
imagine why, Peter.
I was the Oprah of stick insects. You want a stick insect? You want a stick insect? Everyone gets a stick insect.
You get one. You get one. Everyone gets one.
Yeah. If we weren't in the middle of this lockdown, I'd be happy to give out lots of spiders to neighborhood kids. I think the parents might be even more annoyed by that. So.
You would get very unpopular.
Please don't
I think with a lot.
misunderstand me, because I love and respect your work to a degree that I cannot possibly express. But if I had children and you gave them spiders, I would have to murder you. I'm sorry. I respect your work immeasurably. I truly do. And you seem a wonderful man. but I would have to kill you because
I would just have to introduce you to the joys of arachnology first.
Nope.
Yeah.
I agree with Robert Reed on this one, who, by the way, says hi. No, too many legs is bad.
Okay, so we have another question from the side chat, which was when we were a little over 10 minutes in to all of this. It wasn't on topic back then. It's still not on topic, but it's something that I'm a little bit curious about, but I don't know if you can answer it, PZ. We had a question from Iron Charioteer, and he said, how did the type 3 secretory system become the bacterial flagellum? So,
what do you mean, how?
I'm not sure if we have the correct person to answer this question, but
yeah. Yeah, I'm not an expert on that. You'd need a microbiologist to say better about this. But the flagellum is just the outcome of secreting specific linked proteins out the pore produced by the secretory system. So it seems to me fairly easy to imagine how that happened.
Yes.
I think everybody who followed Kitzmiller versus Dover has heard quite enough about the bacterial flagellum and how so magic it is, because there is no explanations, because Goward, and shut up, I don't care if there's 59 peer-reviewed articles and 37 textbooks. Reasons.
Yeah. It's one of the things that was famously put up, and the judge would say, "Oh goody, another day talking about the flagellum."
I have to admit, I really appreciate that a conservative, lifelong Lutheran Christian, Bush-appointed judge who had initially, before he knew anything about it, been all teach the controversy, once he actually saw the evidence, and I have to admit, I miss the days when these types of conservatives still existed, was like, no, you're lying, and no. So no, because I actually possess integrity, so get out.
Yeah.
It was a long-lost mythical time.
Yeah, and it's still weird that some people don't remember this, because, well, no, Hovind wasn't in jail yet because he was picked up in 2006, so he should have been there for the trial. And yet he keeps saying that no bones will be evidence in a courtroom. Well, hey, here's a court case you might want to watch.
Yeah, I have to wonder about that, because, the only defense I've ever heard from creationists in this regard, and please tell me if you've heard anything else, really, because I've brought this up several times, is that the judge was somehow biased against creationists in some way.
Well, all intelligent people are biased against creationists, so yeah, that's not surprising.
He was a lifelong conservative, Bush-appointed Republican judge.
I think
yes, but
convince him.
This is the big creationist lie. They've been trying to associate a narrow, incorrect niche belief in a young Earth with the only true version of both Christianity and conservative thought, and it's not. There are lots of Christians who disagree with that, and a lot of conservatives who disagree with it.
Have you noticed that there's quite a difference? Because you see, if Christians, for example, burn witches or have a crusade or an inquisition, even though they should every moment during that entire expedition justify themselves directly from the scriptures and give chapter and verse and interpretation and quote the church fathers, they are not true Christians, and that is not just to judge Christianity by its fruit in that regard, because it isn't its fruit, because they're not true Christians. But if any atheist should commit any crime whatsoever at any time for any reason, no matter what their reasons, no matter what their conditions or circumstance, that is absolute proof that atheism is the most evil thing in the universe because Stalin, Nazi, Hitler, end of world, evil, 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 blah, blah, blah.
Uh-huh.
Am I the only one who's noticed this?
No, it's always been that way. If they were really smart to discredit atheism, they'd accuse Donald Trump of being one. But,
it wouldn't be hard. I'm pretty sure you could find quotes.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, he after all, he's a hedonist, and he's a liar, and he's a fraud. Obviously, he's a secret atheist.
I have to admit, well, I don't think he's an atheist in so much as he believes himself to be God after a fashion. But I remember seeing, which may have been funnier to me because I was raised evangelical, a meme that said, evangelicals, they spent decades warning us about the end of the world and the Antichrist. Oh, the Antichrist, beware the Antichrist, the Antichrist, the Antichrist. And then when he comes along, they all vote for him.
Yep.
I remember going,
that's pretty accurate.
Yeah,
that's accurate. Yeah,
that's pretty much it.
Yeah. So we have another question from the side chat, and I think I could even answer that one myself, but and I will answer it for myself. They want to ask you, PZ, what would be the next step in a good fight against pseudoscience? Are we going to go after theistic evolutionists? So in that regard, I want to put out that I was recently on Jackson's channel. I host Jackson's talks, and he talked to Sygart. Sygart and I fell out a long time ago, and I did apologize to Cy about what happened. I think that we shouldn't attack theistic evolutionists. I think they might be a good help in at least pointing people to some credible science. So what is your opinion, PZ?
That I disagree with you.
Go ahead.
I've been arguing against theistic evolution for a long time. I think it's one of these things where people like Cy have a good heart and have the best of intentions, but whenever they bring God into the discussion, they are defying the scientific method. That what they're doing is something that I think is damaging in the long run, because it teaches people to not be skeptical, to just believe what feels good to you. Because that's the only argument you have for theistic evolution, is you want God to be in the picture.
Well, I would agree with you on that point, but don't you think that it is good to have people like that around to at least introduce them to young Earth creationists, and maybe they will be, because
care.
Well, I still think that
those are not true Christians who are lukewarm, and the Lord will spit them out of his mouth as per Revelations.
I agree, but they will
here's
still.
The thing. This is why I want to ask you, actually, PZ, because I know you are an atheist, although obviously you focus on your work as an evolutionary biologist and speaking, because you actually, that's your jam, and I respect that immensely. But do you identify as an anti-theist?
Yes, I do. I'm strongly opposed to it, and as I said, I've been arguing against this for a long time. So Ken Miller and I have gone back and forth on it. And the thing is, I will tell you right up front, Ken Miller makes really good arguments for evolution. He's got some killer stuff to talk about. He's written some books that are halfway good. Yeah, Finding Darwin's God, it's amazing. You read through this and it's just beautiful stuff, and it's all excellent. And then there's this one page where all of a sudden he goes into the Catholic arguments, and it's like the book is unbelievable from that point on. And yes, as you could make the argument that they are a gateway for people who are otherwise, in favor of religion, to find their way to evolution and science and biology and all this kind of good stuff.
Reality.
And
yeah,
yeah,
it was for me. I must admit that it was for me.
Yeah, so I'm never going to say, oh, we have to shut up Ken Miller and Cy and all these other people, that they're doing great harm to the science. No, because they have a niche and they have a role to play in the cultural discussion. It's just that I want to bury their beliefs, not those people, because
No, they're brilliant people. I mean, Ken Miller, obviously, very good evolutionary biologist. But there was another question I wanted to ask you, because this has been my response to people who like Kent Hovind. If you recall in the video, of course, every 5 minutes he was trying to say that evolution was a religion, without a God or a dogma or a holy book or anything. But,
and obviously religion is evil. And
but
Kent Hovind agrees with me.
I do appreciate the admission, but for those who said I required faith in science, I thought about it a good deal, and I finally came up with a rebuttal. And since you are a scientist, I would like to know if this is accurate, because you actually can adjudicate that. And my response has always been, science is not a collection of knowledge, though it does have a great deal of it. It's a method of thought that can be most simply expressed and defined as systematic doubt, which is by definition the opposite of faith. Science doesn't require my faith. It doesn't give me platitudes. It gives me an iPhone. I has to iPhone because science. And it produces real results because doubt is its foundation, and it has nothing to do with faith. If you have faith in science, you're sciencing wrong. Is this an accurate statement in your opinion?
Okay, the first thing I'd say, though, is that your reliance on my authority is troubling.
Well,
don't do that.
Yes, but I'm speaking to Christians who appreciate authority. So I'm saying you have more authority in this regard as a scientist than I do as a layman. So it's a comparative.
I would put it slightly different. It's not an apply to authority. It is asking someone who is actually qualified to give an answer.
An appeal to greater expertise.
Yes.
And what I can say is what you said is exactly what I teach my students in introductory biology. We have a long section where we talk about what is science and all this stuff. We go through the history of science from Francis Bacon onwards. And then I have to explain to them that it's not a definitive set of answers. Here's a way to approach the answers.
Well, and
so
I want to go back just a little bit in the conversation before Lilith's question.
Thank you.
You mentioned Ken Miller. I think it was last year when you sent out an invite. At least you sent me an invite to come in, and it was a virtual classroom. You had Ken Miller as a guest in your classroom. I immensely enjoyed that. The only thing I missed in that whole thing was the students didn't actually have a lot of questions for him while I was sitting here, and I didn't have the ability to ask questions. I could just sit there and watch the whole thing.
Right.
And I had an entire list of questions that I wanted to ask him, because I watched the documentary about Kitzmiller versus Dover. I watched a lot of people talk about it. I now forgot their name. He
also had a lecture regarding it where he went over some of the points that he raised in that actual case. And I do think he was the best person, as I believe Richard Dawkins said, to support evolution, because being a Christian, you couldn't go, oh, you just hate God because you want to sin and have to gay sex.
And he prepared, which is something that the only opponent that he had, and I wasn't that Michael Behe?
Michael Behe,
yes. And I still make a joke that he's mentioned in the Bible. There's a moth named after him, the Behe moth.
Is this a moth that happens to run into the flame far more frequently than other moths?
It's a really big moth.
It's a gigantic moth.
It's a gigantic moth that is mentioned in the Bible, the behemoth. And but I had tons of questions for him, and that's the part that I really missed. So, but I still want to thank you, because I refer to that several times when talking to people, that I was really lucky to be there and get that invite from you to watch that whole thing. That to me was
I try to introduce my students to a lot of different ideas. In this case, we did not get a lot of questions, partly because I think they were a little bit intimidated. That sometimes happens when you bring a big name into the classroom, and they're a little, and also because
could it be they knew the subject so well that they didn't have a lot of questions?
That's the other part of it, is that I teach the class, right? So they've been exposed to this many times, and so they didn't really have a lot to ask about it.
Well, Kenneth Miller is an actual and effective evolutionist in terms of being able to write. Actually, I believe, isn't he the leading textbook author on evolution?
Leading high school textbooks in biology.
I see. Yeah. Well, and he is a Catholic, and I'll throw this out there because I know that you will run into this, because I was raised evangelical. A lot of evangelicals believe that Catholics are not true Christians because Mary and adultery and yada, 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 yada. Please use this. Even if it doesn't make sense to you, it will make sense to them. I point out that I bring up the Catholic acceptance of evolution, not because I have no problem with Catholicism, because I'm quite happy to criticize Catholicism in many, many ways. But whatever else you may say about it, true or false, good or bad, you cannot see that Catholicism is a hippy-dippy liberal branch of Christianity, with their do whatever the spirit moves you and we're all happy, happy, joy, joy. They're really quite conservative.
It depends on which branch of Catholicism you're talking about.
True, but if the Pope, with his princess dress and his, Dorothy Ruby slippers, several popes back even, can accept evolution as being obviously true, clearly even the most rigidly orthodox and conservative groups of Christianity have found a way to come to terms with evolution.
Yes.
So, if you're comparing it to, say, your Unitarians or your United Methodists of the, whatever, just, however the spirit moves you and will love you and bake you brownies kinds, that's a very big difference. And even Protestants that I have spoken with have had to admit that, whatever else the Catholics are or aren't, they're not exactly hippie liberals.
Right.
So it will make sense to them, I swear.
Yes. Religion is actually orthogonal to science. That's one of the reasons I'm kind of opposed to mingling them, is it's not a source of knowledge to cite your religious beliefs.
No, but it's an intellectual infection that a great number of people have been burdened with, and minimizing the more harmful effects is something that I do wish to accomplish, even if in principle I would rather eradicate the entire disease.
And then
what can I say?
And then we had entire silence. Okay, so we've been going on for an hour and 50 minutes now, so I think we might want to wrap this up so we get some views.
I see what you good, sir.
People tend to drop off if it goes on longer than an hour and a half, and I could easily talk for another hour and a half, no problem.
P.C. Myers is brilliant. Of course, we can get endless information out of him, but The poor
We
gentleman
do have
probably
a
needs
last question.
something.
Iron Charioteer keeps throwing in questions, and it's another interesting one. He said, "Ask PZ, how does he deal with the legacy that he will perpetually be associated with Behe, Myers, and Ben Stein?"
Oh.
What? I don't feel like I'm. Who remembers Ben Stein?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
My cousins, I regret to inform you.
yeah, but not a lot of people on
Yeah.
social media will refer to Ben Stein anymore, to the documentary.
Yeah.
And I use that word
My
very
father
loosely.
referred to it without remembering what he was referring to. Something, that the premise. He referred to the premise, but without remembering exactly what it was associated with. It had seeded in his mind very deeply as, some
Yeah.
great conspiracy within the scientific community because evil, God-hating reasons.
Well, and I think it would
Right.
still be a compliment if people are looking up those names and then come across PZ's name, and then maybe trying to Google who he is and find out some real science. So I wouldn't
Maybe.
think, yeah, I don't think it's
Yeah.
initially a bad thing.
Well, okay, so it's a connection, but otherwise, yeah, that Behe is discredited now. No, he got blown apart at the Kitzmiller versus Dover trial,
Oh,
and
he did. He
yeah,
absolutely did. And yet I've still seen creationists use memes to me with quotes from him from that trial.
yes,
And I've had to restrain myself from face palming entirely through the surface in front of me. I've taken to wearing oven gloves very frequently.
yes, and the thing is too that he's going to be forgotten. I'll be forgotten too, so that I'm not worried about being forever associated with him. But no, he's a very forgettable and kind of hypocritical character. As for Ben Stein, he's just a bad actor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Well,
an
so-
incredibly irritating one.
I don't think you're going to be
You are.
forgotten, because in Canada, Lilith, in Canada, you got Creation Ministries International, and I'm subscribed to their channel, and they will frequently bring up this guy they call an atheist blogger, called PZ Myers. They will not acknowledge your credentials. They will always
As an
talk
actual
about
evolutionary
you
biologist who's fucking
a-
working.
as just a blogger.
And that's okay. I am a blogger, and I'm an atheist. They can start calling me Grandpa Myers too, and that's also accurate. So
well,
I'm really not.
it annoys me because it is a level of dishonesty. If you're going to bring someone up, then at least bring up what they do for a living and not as a hobby. Because the blogging thing, I think, is more like a hobby to you. It is not your actual job.
Yeah.
And that's why it's
Right.
offensive to me if they keep doing that.
I will say this, Dr. Meyer.
Yeah, I'm. Okay.
I beg your pardon.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, as an escapee from creationist absurdity and idiocy, whether it bears your name or not, your legacy will live on as one who has opposed stupidity and lies and stood for truth and made discoveries that have contributed to such, but also engaged in the battle against deceit and absurdity. And as someone who was raised to believe these absurdities and to almost understand them as much as one can, I would like to say thank you and to salute you.
Okay, sure.
I don't have
Yeah,
an
the thing
actual
is,
drink,
everything.
but I'll join in with my coffee. I fully agree.
Okay, I would just say that everything you said ought to be a universal human property. The disgraceful thing is that it isn't. That there are too many people who
Reason
are.
grant it may be so.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we should really wrap this up. PZ, again, thanks for coming back on the channel. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And
Likewise. Yeah.
And we love having you. Please stick around after the commercial so we can chat a little bit before you leave. Lilith, thanks for doing this with me.
Always a delight.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure having you on. PZ, you got a last message? Do you want anything to shill yourself? Talk about what you do?
Oh, you've already plugged the blog and you've plugged my YouTube channel, and let's see, I have an Instagram channel. I have, all that social media stuff I've been throwing things at. I have a Patreon.
Ooh.
Yeah, join that and send me money. Yeah.
That's the link.
Yes,
that's
we all
the link
use
I
money.
need. That's another link I need to put in the description, and I will. So,
Sure.
yeah, and I want to thank everyone who was in the live chat. Everyone who watched this live. That's always great to see people being interested. Yeah, we're going to be back, and there is something about Kent Hovind coming. I can't say a lot about it, so keep an eye on the Twitter account, YTGGFI. I just see that is misspelled now. So I keep misspelling things. I can't even spell my own Twitter handle. So at least in the scroller it's correct. It has all the handles. So keep an eye on that. There is something good coming regarding Kent Hovind. That's all I'm going to say for now. PZ, thanks for coming, and we'll see what we can come up with next. There are a few things still in the pipeline. It's difficult to get people to commit to a certain day and time, but there is still another thing coming about the human evolution with someone who denies that. So as I said, and we're going to have Erica as a host, trying to explain a little bit about human evolution. So that's it for now. Check out the book in the commercial that is coming, and we will see you all next time. Bye, everyone.